What makes this X5 review any different from all the others you've already seen? Well, probably the fact that it's made by somebody who purchased it with their own money. So let's do a completely unbiased and honest first impressions review of the new Insta360 X5. Now, just to be clear, Insta360 have offered to send me products free of charge, and they were very professional in doing so, but up to this point I have decided to decline these offers and instead purchase products with my own money in order to provide you with the most fair and unbiased reviews. Now, this is the first of several videos I will be producing around the X5. Following up from this one, I will be delving into all kinds of topics, including battery life and performance, which SD card to use, wireless microphones and other audio options using the remote controls, and so on and so on. So be sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the alerts button so you can be notified whenever those new videos post. So in today's video then, we'll be taking a first look at the X5. We'll cover all the main changes compared to the X4, perhaps also look at a few things that are not so great, and of course we'll be doing some side-by-side comparisons against the X4 and trying to answer the question, which is the right one for you, and if you already own the X4, should you be looking to upgrade to the X5? But before we get into it, this. Before we continue with today's video, a quick disclaimer: this video is not sponsored, paid for, or influenced in any way. I purchased all of the equipment with my own money, and the opinions are entirely my own. Now, I do include links to the featured products as well as my recording equipment. These may appear throughout the video and in the video description. If you purchase using these links, I may make a commission, and this is what helps fund the channel, but rest assured there is no price disadvantage to you. You are getting the best price I can find. Alternatively, if you want to support the channel, you could follow this link and buy me a coffee. And of course, if you enjoyed today's video, please remember to hit the like button and consider subscribing to the channel for a lot more similar content. So back to the video. Okay, so let's take a look at what you get when you buy the standard X5 kit. So inside the box, of course, you'll find the camera itself, a protective case similar to the one supplied with the X4. We have a USB charging cable, a lens cloth. We have some paperwork, stickers, and also these special cleaning stickers which are designed for cleaning off the microphone grill on the front of the camera. Placed alongside the X4, you can see that the X5 is almost identical in size. It is identical width. It is about 1 millimeter taller than the X4, and according to the specifications, it is a fraction of a millimeter slimmer than the X4. The main difference is, of course, this new multifaceted faceplate, which apparently Insta360 have determined provides better heat dissipation than the ribbed design on the X4. Other differences you will see on the front include the new windshield over the front-facing microphone and a very slight difference in the design of the lens, which is just a fraction wider than that on the X4. Looking at the two from the screen side, you'll see there's almost no difference at all, apart from, once again, the slightly different design on the lens. If we look at both cameras from the sides, you'll notice that most of the buttons, ports, and microphones have been moved to slightly different locations. More on that later on. And you'll also notice that the position of the USB hatch has been moved from the battery side on the X4 to the opposite side on the X5, and now, unlike the X4, which has a latched door, it is now more of a sliding mechanism to open it, which I have to say feels a little bit more secure. And if we turn our attention to the base of the two cameras, you'll notice one other key design change, and that is the inclusion of a quick release mount on the X5 in addition to the standard 1/4 20 mount. Now, unfortunately, you do not receive a quick release mount together with the camera, but if you own an Ace or Ace Pro 2 from Insta360, you'll be glad to know that this mount is fully compatible. When it comes to the user interface on both cameras, obviously this is mostly the same, but you will notice there are a few changes to the overall user interface in order to accommodate the new features of the X5. So in this section, I don't want to go through all of the changes from the X4 to the X5. I really want to focus in on the most significant enhancements. And clearly for me, the biggest enhancement is the increased sensor size, which together with the increased processing power should result in significantly better image quality. So the sensor size has been increased from a 1/2 inch sensor in the X4 to a 1/1.28 inch sensor in the X5. Now these sensor size values are pretty confusing because they don't actually refer to the size of the sensor itself. But if we compare the two, the 1/2 inch sensor in the X4 has an area of just under 31 square millimeters, and in the X5 we now have a sensor with an area of 75 square millimeters, which is almost 2.5 times the size, and that is truly a massive increase. Now, having a larger sensor is beneficial because basically it receives more light, which improves what's called signal to noise and ultimately gives you a wider dynamic range, which is basically the ability of your camera to still get detailed information in the brightest highlights and the darkest shadows of your image. Now, there's a perception that this is only useful in low light situations. And yes, you will see the most significant difference in low light situations, but having a larger sensor with a wider dynamic range will help you in all sorts of filming situations. And we'll see some examples of this later on in our side-by-side testing. Now, I'm sure many of you are hoping for an even larger sensor on the X5, such as the 1-inch sensor as found on the 1RS 1-inch 360 edition. But the problem is when you have a larger sensor, you also need larger lenses. And as we saw on the 1RS, the head was massive and really not practical as an action camera. So I think the 1/1.28 inch sensor is a pretty good compromise. And what I find really impressive is the fact that they've managed to squeeze that much larger sensor into the same form factor as the X4. And combined with the increased processing power, I'm pretty sure the X5 will actually outperform even the 1RS 1-inch edition. Second on my list is another major enhancement which for some bizarre reason nobody is talking about, and that is finally a dedicated wireless microphone for the X5, which appears to be very similar to what DJI does, combining its wireless microphones with its action cameras. If you've been following the channel, you'll know that this is something I have complained about with every Insta360 camera. When it comes to support of a wireless microphone, you basically had two options, either to use the mic adapter and create an extremely cumbersome and fragile setup on the side of your camera, which of course is also not waterproof, or to use a Bluetooth microphone with absolutely abysmal quality and range. Well, now finally it appears that Insta360 have listened and come up with their own dedicated wireless microphone. Now, I have not been able to test this yet. So far, it seems that the only place to order this microphone is direct from Insta360. I have mine on order, I'm expecting it soon, and when it finally arrives, I will be doing some in-depth testing to see just how good it is. But if it is anywhere close to as good as DJI's Osmo audio solution, it will be a major upgrade for vloggers and motovloggers, so be on the lookout for that test video, which I will post as soon as I am able to. Next enhancement is user replaceable lenses. Now, with the nature of 360 cameras, of course, it is essential that you have lenses that extend beyond the body of the camera, and as such, it is very easy to damage them. Now, with previous models, we've had lens guards. For the X3, we had sticky lens guards. For the X4, we had bayonet mount lens guards. But the problem with these lens guards, particularly with them being curved, is that they degrade your image. They're susceptible to lens flare. It creates additional problems when it comes to stitching, and the lens guards themselves can be very easily scratched and further degrade the image. Personally, I never use the lens guards and I just risk it, but if you do that and you damage your lens, your only option is then to send in your camera for a very costly repair, and of course you're then without your camera while the repair takes place. Well, now on the X5 we have user replaceable lenses. For the pretty reasonable price of $30, you can buy a single lens replacement kit, and in the event that your lens gets damaged, you can do the replacement in the field in just a few minutes. And I'm sure you've already seen the dozens of videos of otherwise perfectly sane people taking hammers to their X5s in order to demonstrate this. Personally, I believe them, so I'm not going to do that. I'll just let you watch those videos. Next up, there are a number of enhancements and features aimed at simplifying your workflow, in particular what's called the new Insta360 mode. Now, one of the big advantages, of course, of a 360 camera is the shoot first, aim later concept, where you basically capture everything in all directions, and later on you can reframe in whatever direction or directions that you want. And as good as that is, one of the issues is that it creates a lot of work. So Insta360 have come up with a solution to that called Insta360 mode. And what this does is it basically allows you to select a certain perspective to capture as a flat video file in addition to capturing the entire 360 video. So you can capture your footage and then export your flat file out directly without any editing. And of course you still have the 360 file to fall back on if you want to do additional reframing. Now, there are a couple of limitations to the Insta360 mode, the main one for me being that the 360 video is limited to 5.7K. Also, the flat file you generate is also limited to 1080p, which initially I was concerned about, but then when you think about it, by the time you've extracted a flat file from even an 8K 360 file, you're generally not getting a lot more than 1080p, and as long as you're just sharing it to social media and being viewed mainly on something like a smartphone, 1080p is probably good enough. Now, I do plan on doing some testing on the Insta360 mode, in particular to compare the quality of Insta360 with manually extracted flat files from an 8K 360 video, so be on the lookout for that video also. And the final major enhancement that I want to talk about is the battery performance. Now, with the launch of the X5, Insta360 have introduced a new battery with a slightly larger capacity. It's about a 5% increase in capacity without any increase to the size of the battery. In fact, when I weighed them, it was 1 gram lighter than the X4's battery. But using this new battery, Insta360 claims the X5 will run up to 37% longer than the X4. Now, that does need to be taken with a grain of salt because that 37% increase is based on the use of what's called endurance mode, which is the equivalent of buying a Ferrari and driving it around at 40 miles an hour. It comes with a lot of sacrifices, and frankly, I don't see myself using endurance mode very often. But even without endurance mode, my initial testing indicates that there is still a small advantage in terms of battery life compared to the X4, which, when you consider the fact that it is driving a much larger sensor and significantly increased processing power, is a pretty good result. Another benefit of the new battery, at least on paper, is that it supports fast charging. Now, I say on paper because my initial testing indicates that it doesn't actually support fast charging at all, and in fact it charges slower than the X4's battery, but that's something I still need to do some more testing on. So be on the lookout for that video also. Overall, I have to say I'm pretty impressed with the X5, and there really isn't that much to complain about, but I do have a couple of complaints. Now, the first one is not so much a problem of the X5 itself, but more a problem that we've seen anytime we go from one X generation camera to the next, and that is the lack of backward compatibility for the core accessories. And it starts with the most basic accessories, and that is, of course, batteries and their chargers. Now, as we already saw, the form factor of the X5 is almost identical to the X4, and also the battery is almost identical, with the one key exception being that they've moved the location of the interface port. Now, it seems to me that with a little bit of forethought, Insta360 could easily have used the exact same form factor for the X5 battery as on the X4. Frankly, they could have even used the exact same battery. I know from my perspective, I have an X4, I have 3 batteries and the charging hub, and I would much rather them use the same battery on the X5. Even without the added 5% capacity, at least I'd already have 3 spare batteries and a charger for my X5. And the compatibilities don't stop there. As we just said, the X5 is almost identical to the X4 in terms of its form factor, but almost, of course, means not identical. The dimensions of the X5 are ever so slightly different, and the location of every single button, port, and microphone is also ever so slightly different. So any form-fitting accessory, for example a dive case, is not going to be compatible between the X4 and the X5. And the same almost certainly applies to any cages that you have for your X4. And the list continues with things like the microphone adapter, the quick reader, and so on. Now, it's not clear to me if this is just a lack of foresight on the part of Insta360, or if maybe it's a deliberate strategy to get users to buy new accessories every time they upgrade to the latest version. But either way, it doesn't seem like a good strategy to me. And in fact, for any user who is heavily invested in the X4 with multiple batteries, chargers, dive cases, cages, and so on, it may actually dissuade them from upgrading to the new version. The second issue that I want to mention is something that has plagued pretty much every generation of every camera from Insta360, and that is Bluetooth implementation, in particular when it comes to the remote controls. In all of the tests and reviews I've done with Insta360 cameras and their respective remotes, without fail I've seen the same issues occurring, including long connection times, unreliable connections that cause errors, so you are recording when you think you're not, or you're not recording when you think you are, you're in the wrong mode, whatever the case may be. Also issues with reconnecting a remote that was already paired, and the list goes on. Now, I still plan on doing some more in-depth testing with the X5, but I did do some preliminary tests with the mini remote and the GPS preview remote, and it seems to be the same old story. And in fact, some of the remote functions didn't even work at all as advertised. Now, perhaps these are just teething issues with the X5, and perhaps these can be addressed with a firmware update. That remains to be seen, and I plan on doing some more in-depth testing on this. Okay, let's start out our testing outdoors. We have a beautiful day, ideal filming conditions. The sun is shining through. There's a bit of clouds, but you can see there's beautiful blue sky. There's lots of color in the trees and the bushes, so we really have ideal type of recording conditions, and probably the most typical conditions that you would want to use for your action camera or 360 camera. I have the X4 on my left, that would be your right, and the X5 on your left. So what do you think? How does the image quality compare between the two? How does the image detail compare? How do the colors look between the two? Now, because of its larger sensor, the X5 should be showing you better detail and colors in both the extremely bright and extremely dark parts of the image. But what do you think? How does the image quality compare between the two? Now, while we're doing some vlogging, we may as well also test the onboard microphones of each. So right now I'm talking to you over the onboard microphones of the X5. Let's switch over to the X4 and compare the difference between the two. So now I'm talking to you over the onboard microphones of the X4. Let's quickly switch back over to the X5 so we can get that comparison. How do the two compare? Are you noticing any difference in the audio quality between the two? So when filming outdoors in bright sunny conditions, you can see there's not a huge difference between the two. But you can also see, particularly when I turn back and face the sun, how the X5 provides better detail and colors in the bright sky and treetops, while at the same time still maintaining that same detail and definition in the dark shadows. While filming my B-roll, I encountered a bit of wind, so let's see how well that new wind guard works. First, this is how the X4 handled it. Just gently compare. Okay, we've got a bit of wind going right now. So let's rewind and see how the X5 handles it. And just generally compare. Okay, we've got a bit of wind going right now. Okay, so let's continue our testing now indoors, and once again I have the X4 on your right and the X5 on your left. Now of course the big news with the X5 is its much larger sensor, which is intended to give it, among other things, much better low light performance. And when you watch the various promo videos and various YouTube reviews, you'll always see examples of this by walking around a city at night, and I'm sure many of you thinking, well, that's not the type of filming that I do, so I don't really need that. But it's important to remember that whenever you are filming inside in artificial lighting, that's also a low light environment. So in this environment also, the X5 should give superior performance with better detail, better colors, and also less noise in the shadowy areas of the image. But what do you think? How does the image quality compare between the X4 and the X5? Now it is important to mention that I don't have any special lighting here. This is just a standard lit room, much like you would have in any typical indoor situation. And while we're doing this test, let's go ahead and also check out the onboard microphone comparison. So up to this point, you've been listening to me over the onboard microphones of the X5. Let's switch over to the X4 and compare the audio quality now in an indoor environment. So right now I'm talking to you over the onboard microphones of the X4. Let's switch back over to the X5 so we can compare the audio quality between the two. What do you think? How do they compare? Now, obviously for these tests, I have both cameras set to identical settings. So I'm using standard video mode, 8K 30 frames per second, and everything set to fully automatic. But of course the X5 now offers the new pure video mode for low light situations, and in fact when I set up to record these, a caption appeared on the screen indicating that this was a low light situation and recommending I use the pure video mode. So let's go ahead and switch the X5 now to pure video mode and see what difference it makes. Okay, so now we are recording in pure video on the X5. Of course, that is not something that's offered on the X4, so we are continuing to operate in standard video mode, both at 8K 30 frames per second, both with fully automatic settings. So what do you think? Do you notice the difference between the standard video and the pure video mode? How does the image quality now compare between the X5 and the X4? And just to complete our testing, let's see if we can see the difference between the X5's pure video mode and standard video modes. All too often, camera manufacturers will release a next-gen product as a matter of routine with very minor increments over the previous generation. But this is definitely not one of those cases. The X5 is a major step up compared to the X4. Clearly, Insta360 have been listening to their users and provided them with a much larger sensor and increased processing power, which together definitely give you the opportunity to get higher quality video. And there are a whole host of additional features based on user feedback, like the replaceable lenses, the various features and modes that simplify the workflow, and the one I'm particularly excited about, that new wireless microphone. I can't wait to get my hands on that. So the big question is, which is the right one for you, the X4 or the X5? Or if you already own an X4, should you be looking to update to the X5? Well, first off, if you do not already own the X4, then I think the decision's easy. Choosing between the X4 and the X5, absolutely go with the X5. The list price is only slightly higher than the original list price of the X4. Of course, we're going to see some heavy discounting now on the X4, but even with that, I still think it's worth paying that little bit extra in order to get the capabilities of the X5. If you already own an X4, then of course it's a little more complicated, and it's going to depend on two basic things: the type of filming that you typically do and how heavily you are already invested in the X4 platform. For me, the decision probably comes down to two key features: the larger sensor and increased processing power, and that new wireless microphone capability. As far as the sensor is concerned, if you typically do most of your filming outdoors in nice brightly lit scenarios, then probably you won't see that much difference between the X4 and the X5 in terms of your overall image quality. And as far as the wireless microphone capability is concerned, if you don't do much vlogging, or at least you don't do it in environments where you need the camera to be rugged and waterproof, then here too that feature might not be that important to you. But if you do plan on leveraging that low light capability, if you're a vlogger or moto vlogger and you want a rugged waterproof solution, then definitely the X5 is worth the upgrade. Although I should add that as far as the wireless microphone is concerned, I do still have to test it. So that wraps it up for another video. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed today's video, please remember to hit that like button and consider subscribing to the channel for a lot more similar content. If you have any questions, any comments, if you want to share your experience or make suggestions for future videos, please drop those into the comments section. Otherwise, thanks again for watching.